Hey, welcome to ABA Inside Track, the podcast that's like reading in your car, but safer. I'm Robert Perry Cruz, your host for today. Now, for those of you who listen to the show regularly, you'll know that we're in the midst of our Supervision September episodes, and one of the exciting things we were able to do was speak with Dr. Jamie Hughes-Lika about technology and how she uses technology for supervision. Now, if you listen to our supervision episodes, you would have heard a snippet of some of the key points of our conversation. But what you might not know was that our conversation was quite a lot longer and included a lot more discussion about not just what are some good technologies, but what is important about technology? How does one learn new technology? What are some limitations of technology? We went into a lot more that we thought that our audience might like to know more about, because unlike, say, 10 years ago, where you could still say things like, oh, I don't really use a computer that often to do my work, you really don't have that luxury anymore because there's so much to do. You need to know so very much, and just doing it the pen and paper way isn't going to be effective and efficient, which are two things that our guest, Dr. Hughes-Lika, is very aware of. So I hope you enjoyed those snippets from the supervision episode. If you haven't listened to that, you can go right ahead and do that. Otherwise, though, here is close to our full conversation about the use of technology for BCBAs. So I am talking on the phone to Dr. Hughes-Lika. How are you doing today?
I'm doing very well, Rob. Thanks. How are you?
Excellent. I'm doing great. And so it was really, really nice to get you on the phone, because I was able to see you speak at a recent conference here in Massachusetts about technology. And as much as I've had to learn just putting together this podcast, I was blown away at not just how many software options there were out there for BCBAs to use for a variety of parts of the job, but how many of them I had never, ever heard of. And the choice was either feel like an old person and give up, or no, I'm gonna call Jamie. I'm gonna say, please be on my show and tell me a little bit about all this magic that you have.
Absolutely. When you go down that rabbit hole, it's hard to come back out of. But when you can come back out of it, you can come out with some good gems.
Excellent. So before we get into that, though, Jamie, would you mind just telling our listeners, if they haven't seen you at a conference or know you professionally, tell a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. I have been in the field of behavior analysis for over 22 years, working in a variety of different populations, different placements, different settings, and have been certified as a BCBA back in 2002, early days.
Very early days.
Right in the inception. I did my master's at Ohio State with Coop, Tim, and Bill. That was back in 2004. And then I became a BCBA, go Bucks, OHIO, for all the Buckeyes listening. And then I decided to move to England and do a PhD in intellectual and developmental disabilities, where I got to study with Peter McGill and Mecca Chiesa, some amazing behavior analysts. So I have really got to run the whole gauntlet of going through the supervision process for all three levels, which has been great. And it's provided me some really good insight into the supervision process, the expectations, and everything else as we go. I did a little bit of work in Albania, where I met my husband in England. We moved to Albania and did some work on an Autism Speaks grant with Dr. Dub Fine. And it was using an online parent training component to educate families. And again, having that technology in it. As I have really the last kind of 5 years been trying to level up myself in terms of my application of technology. And what you saw at Boston was probably, that was back in May, right?
Yes.
Yes. So I've had that many more months to keep playing with things. So I've learned new applications and I've got new systems in place. And that is the beauty of technology. It's forever evolving and changing. And it's also the downfall of, I just get a systems in place and then I think, there's a better way to do it. And I have to redo my system. So the evolution is growing pains, I think.
Is technology something that you've just felt like, well, I have to know this to keep current in the field? Or is it more you come up with a problem and you've just always gone to technology to say, I bet technology has a solution? Like, how did you kind of evolve your own technology skills?
What I'm always looking to do as a very busy person with a color-coded schedule is to look at how can I do it the most effective, efficient way possible. Mm-hmm. And what I was doing is I had some really awesome systems in place for teaching, for supervision, for client data. But what I was finding was the amount of work that I had to do manually to get to the level of quality that I wanted was so cumbersome. Mm-hmm. So when I stumbled upon some of these awesome technology applications, that shaved off a lot of time. And it also gave me some real-time data that I could click, take a look at that would have taken me hours to do on Excel, paper, pencil. Mm-hmm. So it was really a motivation on my behalf of trying to be able to figure out, I don't want to lose the quality, but I do want to increase the amount of time it takes me to get this data at my fingertips to make my decisions on guiding supervisees, guiding client programs myself. So that's really how I kind of got into it. And that really has evolved into everything that I do has some component of technology, low tech or high tech. And we can chat a little bit more about the differences between those.
When we first started talking about possibly coming on the show, I think kind of the crux of the discussion was going to be pick your top, 5 or pick your top technology pieces that you think no BCBA should be without. So why don't we kind of get into pieces of technology that you've recently found, or you even in the past few months noticed that you just say this is the new hotness. Everybody should be using this, and maybe why.
Absolutely. And I think it depends on what you want to use it for, what you want to do with it. But the things that I picked to talk about today, I think are so general that you could pick up and apply it to any population that you work with in any capacity, which makes them very user-friendly, which is why I think it'd be good to talk about those ones. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that I also stumbled on a search somewhere was a book by Bill Thurster. Mm-hmm. And I mentioned it in the talk in Boston, and it's called Teaching Machines. Mm-hmm. And his father, Charles, was a colleague of Skinner, goes back to those days, but it really looks at how technology has been used in education. That book provided some really great information about how to develop more effective technologies. So I got the book, read it on the airplane on the way to Boston, and it's not a hard read, $20, something like that on Amazon, but it really kind of opened some eyes up into the different types of technology. And I think education, because that's what we do, we teach. Mm-hmm. If it's supervisees, if it's our clients, if it's something that we're learning for ourselves. So I always go back to that book as a really good resource to open my eyes up a little bit more for something I haven't seen.
Okay.
And then when I think about the different types of supervision that I do, the different types of technology that I use, I kind of have them categorized into low tech, which is, often free, not a lot of fanciness to it. And when I think about low tech, I think about active student responding. Mm-hmm. So some of our response cards that we used back at Ohio State, looking at, that's a great way to get student engagement, very low tech. You just hold it up, choral responding, yell out the answer, guided notes. So low tech, but there are also high tech ways to do those same things. So if I'm looking at active student supervising parent engagement or responding, and I want to think about technology, there's a lot of different approaches out there. Mentimeter is great. And I'm going to try to give you here's a free version, and here's, if you pay a little bit more, some whistles and bells. Mm-hmm. So Mentimeter is great. It's a startup coming out of Sweden. It's an interactive presentation software. And the thing that I love about them, their tagline is making meetings fun, effective, and efficient. And you already heard me say my two favorite words, yep. Effective and efficient. So you know where I'm going with this.
Oh, yes.
So it's great in terms of doing ASRs in real time. You get the code, you put your data in, it pops it up on the screen. Mm-hmm. So your participants are always involved. There's a really cool video on YouTube, about 3 minutes, for Mentimeter, how it works. And they do a great job of laying out where it came from, why they developed it, and where they want to see it go. So I would encourage anybody to think about using Mentimeter in their group supervision meetings, in their staff trainings that they do, if they do large group audiences. Everyone has their phone out anyway, so at least maybe they're actually participating with you by tagging their comments and putting it up on the screen.
I want to say I was in a couple professional development trainings this summer, and I feel like I heard at least Menti. I assume it's the same company.
Yes.
Yes. It's just all sorts of types of answering questions, or it's good for your kind of survey questions.
You can put memes up there. You can put surveys. You can do multiple choice. I think it's pretty unlimited with what you want it to do, and you set it up to however you want to customize it for your audience. You can make word clouds, which is great. So you can have what's the most important thing about supervision. And then the number one answer that everyone gives the most frequently is going to pop up the biggest word on the word cloud. So you can see some really cool visuals emphasized by the most common frequently used words submitted by your audience. You've got quizzes you can do. There's open-ended questions. I've never done that because I really want that quick visual up on my screen to show people.
It's a big word cloud with everyone's paragraph answers on there.
That's right. That's enough. And then it's quizzes and scales, kind of rating scales, multiple choice, images. And we just started playing around with some images of what best represents you when you're working with our clients or for our supervisees. And one is like, Mr. Rogers, everything's going really well. And the other main picture is the gentleman from Jurassic Park where he's clicker training the velociraptors. And we're hanging out, but things aren't going very well.
No.
So sometimes that provides some comedy in terms of how are things going with the application of our work. Clients, parents, supervisees. Instead of a yes or no, let's put a visual up there. Just a little comedic relief, gets more engagement, and then we can have a conversation from that point.
That's great. I can see that being hugely beneficial in, say, a discussion, especially with newer BCBAs or BCBA candidates about ethics. Because I know anytime someone throws out, here's the big ethics question, I never want to say an answer because I'm so worried. I'm trying my best. I'm trying to be ethical, but I'm so worried it's going to be the answer that everyone looks at you like, ooh, what kind of monster are you? Let's take your certification quick. If I can just do it online, then I can be honest and then get the feedback as to, maybe my answer wasn't right and here's why, without that sense of what is this audience going to think of my answer if it's a bad answer. So I like that. And
I think that's a great thing that you bring up as well. Not just the answer, is the question that we're asking the audience written in a way where we're getting that kind of data that we're looking for. So not is your answer wrong, was the question maybe not worded well? And you'll see that by the data of the participants, who's getting what you're asking and who's not getting it. Yeah. So maybe we need to calibrate our question asking.
So I
feel like it's bidirectional.
So the marriage of the old low tech with a more high tech means of responding. I like that.
Yes, and I think in our culture, we really are seeking that immediate gratification. We have our smartphones at our fingertips to get anything literally within a second. If it takes more than 5 seconds for my phone to ping something up, I'm getting impatient. Because we're so used to. Do you remember the dial-up days? The internet wave? Yeah, okay. Yeah,
all that good stuff.
That's what I feel like when the phone takes longer than 5 seconds to pull up my Google search. So we have that data in real time, literally at our fingertips with our smartphones and our devices. And it gives that audience interaction and engagement, just gets it right there for you where there's no delay. So that's a great one. Another one very similar to that is called Kahoot. And I played around. Have you heard of that one?
I think I have seen this being used in middle school and high school for like little review quizzes. Is that the same thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a game-based learning platform. So think of like gamified. There's point systems. You can do interesting music and visuals to highlight everything. It's very similar to quizzes and playbuzz. So the reason I throw these out there is because we do a lot of group supervision, and this has been a really great way to get supervisees to engage in quizzes to keep checking their knowledge, not the performance competence, the knowledge, without them feeling put on the spot and pressured, where I'm looking at this room, a table of supervisees with a blank stare on their face, a little bit unsure of who's going to get called on. Having them work through this gamified platform makes it more fun, takes that stress off. They can team up, and it provides that fast right or wrong, so correct or not, feedback on the device and on the screen that we have on the PowerPoint. So again, thinking about the supervisees, clients, whoever it is that you're using this technology with, what do we want it to accomplish? I want it to be fun, engaging, and if any way less stressful, that's great too.
Mm-hmm. You may never have had this argument, and I would never make this myself, but I know I've heard a lot of folks, less so in our field, who say that when gamifying or when turning learning or turning supervision or turning a professional field into a game, that defeats the purpose of the learning process, or it makes everything too light, and it almost makes it amateurish. I mean, what would you say to someone who, if you brought this up in supervision, or you brought this up at even like a skills meeting with your colleagues who kind of came at you with that response of like, why are we turning this a game? This is a serious business we're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question. And I would refer them to an article. This is by Janet Twyman, who's just amazing with anything technology. She's the name that I Google the most. It's called something like Envisioning Education 3.0. Mm-hmm. Fusion of Behavior Analysis, Learning, Science, and Technology, I think is the name of it. I can check that.
Okay.
That article really talks about education 1.0, 2.0, 3.0. Mm-hmm. And it talks about what the history of education and learning used to be and what we are evolving into today in education 3.0, almost getting into education 4.0. Mm-hmm. So looking at education 3.0, where we're at right now, is the information should come from multiple sources. Mm-hmm. When we think about outcome and learning, we want to think about academic and social competencies. And, that's another big word that I like to use, competencies, and how important that is in terms of retention, acquisition, application. Mm-hmm. And it also really, I think, with our technology, really kind of gets that it's not just that old school, it's the teacher in the schoolhouse talking down and the information trickles down. We are now using technology able to have a more bidirectional, multi-directional approach to education, mm-hmm. where we want supervisees students to have these critical thinking skills, to develop an understanding of that information on their own. Using technology is a great way to help with that. So I think as we move into the direction of personalized learning, thinking about the Keller plan, thinking about all of Fred's great work, thinking about what they're doing at the Morningside model, mm-hmm. looking at how they are customizing instruction for learners. And I think technology is just at the top of the game for that.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think we definitely are a field that understands that it's, the learner comes first, so that if this is the best way to present information in a way that gets the most responding, then that's the way that should be done. I think it's more the kind of older school educators who might have a problem with, anyone who gives you the old, people should learn because for learning's sake, like that's some sort of measurable quantity that we have inside of us. Yeah.
Yes. And it's really, if you think about Skinner in 1954, the science of learning and the art of teaching, again, we're thinking about, in that book, they describe a technology of instruction based on principles of learning, incremental steps, sequencing the instruction, the rates of learner interaction, all of the reinforcement that comes in, and that individual pacing. So I look at, if gamified apps are a way to get student engagement retention, that's just a bonus to everything else that we're learning. And if that's how some supervisees, client staff are able to get that information, then that's the personalized approach that we want to take to it. Mm-hmm. Does it replace the teacher? Not necessarily. Mm-hmm. Depends on your teacher. I'm sure you've sat in a lecture and you were sitting there and your eyes kind of glaze over and you hear them, but you're not really listening.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
So some of those in terms of Playbuzz, quizzes, Kahoot, those are all very similar in terms of those gamified self-paced quizzes to review, assess, and engage the learners. Mm-hmm. And then the Mentimeter, again, looking at the interactive presentation where you have, again, more back and forth between your audience to engage you. Mm-hmm. Those are some really good in terms of ASR technology.
That's great. And I know with Kahoot, I've seen it used with students and they could work in groups. So they'd set like a pretty long kind of latency between question and then when you need to respond. So I've seen students working together. And to be honest, most questions you're asked in this field, it's not, oh, you've only got 10 seconds, you better have an answer. It's, talk to your colleagues, talk to the people you work with about the best answer, especially if it's something very complicated. So that almost may lend itself more to, the difference between times you need to know this, and here are problems you need to talk out and come up with a solution. It might even lend itself a little bit more to group discussion.
Absolutely. And I think we're really getting into that deeper learning when we do that. We're trying to get this core content over to our students or supervisees. We're trying to get them to think critically and problem solve, to collaborate, and to be effective communicators about their own learning. And I think by using this technology and working in these kind of systems, we are encouraging and potentially reinforcing those skills that are developing. Number 2, we look at screencasting. And what screencasting is going to let us do is get a digital recording of a computer screen output. Mm-hmm. So it tracks the movement, the interaction with my computer screen, and it records it. Mm-hmm. So I have a Mac, so I have been using QuickTime Player for this.
Okay.
So I don't know if you're a Mac or a PC user.
Mostly PC.
Okay. Do you know if they have a screencasting type of product?
Yes, I have. I've used Snagit. I've used before.
Yeah.
Camtasia software will do that. I believe even PowerPoint, you can do some amount of. Actually, no, not that's not screen recording. That's more just recording what you see on the screen.
The audio
is more passive. That's not quite the active responding you might get. And I think even with some of the softwares, you can build in your questions. So areas of the screen that you have to click to move on. And I know when I was learning a little bit about training or online training, it was all about how many clicks do your respondents actually need to make? Because if you just have a video that they watch, that's better than just making you get up in front of a bunch of people and talk, but it's not really taking advantage of the screencasting software.
Absolutely. And there's been a few that we've been playing around with. Screen Chomp, Explain Everything, Edu-Creations. Those are 3. They're free. They're not, I think, as great as Camtasia. Mm-hmm. But they're available to kind of start playing around with, and they all do the same type of action. It's an interactive whiteboard that screencasts. Mm-hmm. So I think about, what if I was teaching a supervisee or a student single subject research design, and I wanted to highlight the important features of a graph? Mm-hmm. I could literally draw on my screen and highlight that in an interactive model for them to really draw their attention to what I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. So it really kind of levels up, again, the game. And I'm glad that you mentioned Camtasia. And I'd love your feedback, because I'm on the fence of Camtasia or Adobe Captivate to move every presentation up to the next level. Have you seen either? Yeah,
I've
the prices.
Yeah. You could get some decent education prices, because I work in public schools, and I have for many years. So when I've had to look into pricing, I usually get that sweet educator discount when I call them up, which is, often it's, $100 off, it's really significant. Wow. Yeah. When you're in the private sector, it's, hey, how much money do you have? And that's how much our software costs. I enjoyed Camtasia. I think if you wanted to do a lot of the fancy things, you sort of had to buy into their ecosystem. And I was by no means an expert, and this may have changed. It's been about a year and a half, 2 years since I think I've really used it actively. The Adobe suite, it's always the more expensive of the two, but a lot of what I would hear online is, if you have the money to spend, it lets you do the most. It does seem to be the case. But again, I kind of like you kind of started our talk. If you don't know what you're using your technology for, or you don't have the time to learn the technology, maybe cheaper is better with less bells and whistles, because you're only going to do 2 or 3 things with it, at least to start. And then, 4 years from now, that $100 you sank into Camtasia isn't going to matter when you got to shell out another $300 or whatever for the Adobe software.
Exactly. And I think that's a great point that you bring up. And that's kind of how I got into it. Free demo, free trial. And I would play around and figure out, one, if I could quickly figure out what the system is and if it worked for me. And 2, wow, this is pretty good. I do want to pay. I do want to use this for utilizing active student engagement, increasing responding, having a way to track competencies. And one of the things that I remember, it was called HeadSprout. Again, I think Janet Twyman was, yes. Then I think it was Mimeo, maybe back to HeadSprout. Something sold, something got back. So you remember HeadSprout, right?
Yes, I do.
Amazing. So looking at this, and I had all of my nephews go through this reading program. It was just so amazing. What blew my mind about this technology was that every click of the program was tracked. Mm-hmm. And that there were multiple levels of error correction embedded into the teaching sequences, really ensuring that each kiddo that was using it was getting mastery before moving on to the next module, to the next lesson. And then the assessment and the data that behind the scenes, kind of the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain, that I could see and look at the progress, everything. I just think, oh my goodness, for supervisees, or RBTs, how amazing to have a gamified online program like Headsprout for their development of watching scenarios between mock parents and staff dealing with difficult situations, dealing with learners, working through this collaborative process and doing it where we are getting to see their thinking process, how they're actioning those selecting on the platform as opposed to doing it in real time.
I think that's an excellent way. I mean, a lot of what we need to do as practitioners requires the use, to learn to be a practitioner, requires the use of behavioral skills training. And some of those skills are very easy. Discrete trial training, you can do that with BST all day. But talking to a parent, sharing the results of a graph with a colleague, some of those are really hard to do unless you have a lot of confederates to practice with. And for some folks, if you have a lot of supervisees, you kind of have a captive audience that can help out with that. But for some folks, you have one supervisee. That's the only person you have, and you're the only two behavior analysts in your entire area of the world. So you make whatever you can, and you can only pretend so much in those scenarios and have it be meaningful, I think. I mean, I can role play I'm the angry parent all day, but I've only got about 2 scenarios in my back pocket before I'm like, well, hopefully they're never different than these two.
Rote teaching gives you rote learning.
Exactly.
And that's what we get. No, I think it's great. And I think about when I select any type of technology or I'm thinking about instructional design, and that's really where I'm going, is using technology to create a personalized system of instruction for supervisees. Could apply to RBTs, parent training, generalization is limitless. And I think about, what do I want to see? So how would I measure the success or the outcome of this technology, this application of technology, my instructional design? What repertoires are required for each of the different components? So have I outlined in my technology application something that's doable, measurable, observable, that I can customize and get it to do? And then the last component, do I have a program technology system that works for my learners, my supervisees? And also, very important, do I have a program that works for me, the supervisor, the teacher? Because I think if all of those variables don't line up like the stars, you have issues with application and sustainability. It won't work. You'll stop using it.
Oh, yes. Well,
I don't know if you've ever encountered that.
Well, I mean, I think a lot of you, when I observe your original talk, was a lot of just, this is amazing. When am I going to learn how to do all of this? So there was a sense of some of the pieces of software you were sharing looked very simplistic. I'm sorry, but not simplistic, but simple to implement in at least a rudimentary fashion. Some looked a little more complicated and required more planning, I think, than I would be able to do for the software to be useful to me. So having something like, I know QuickTime's on every Mac, so having that available right off the bat without needing to go find it, then pay for it, is helpful. I'm sure there is some free software for PC. I mean, you can get a sample of the Snagit software. I think I've used that for screen caps. You can get a nice sample for. But even Camtasia wasn't that expensive if you're in an educational field. Even if you weren't, I think it was $150, $200. It wasn't horrible.
I think it's around $200. Yep. And I like what you just said, how do I get the information? How do I do it? And I think about when I run a VB map on a kiddo, I do a barriers assessment. And one of the ones that almost always comes up for my little ones is the response requirement weakens the MO. So I want to learn about technology. I want to utilize it. I don't have the time, energy to put into it. So my motivation lowers with, I'm okay with my system.
Yeah.
That's for a lot of people, I think. That's the time constraints of doing multiple things in our job. And this being something that kind of evolves as a project or a need, if you can get over that initial hump of, yes, it takes a little bit of time to learn it, get fluent with the system, I think you will then find how efficient it can be. And you will see that in the long run, the investment of your time into switching to some technology applications. Mm-hmm. But we all know what is here in the forefront is what kind of goes. It's tough to change those behavioral repertoires. I'm going to chat about GoReact, my third little recommended technology.
Excellent.
So GoReact is that video software that I showed that I'm telling you is a game changer. Mm-hmm. It is just phenomenal. So GoReact is it's a very cheap to use platform, and we're looking at being able to provide a wide variety of feedback in different ways mm-hmm. to make the learners' training faster and more effective. Mm-hmm. And I think their tagline is something like great feedback, crazy fast. Which is great because that's my efficiency.
How much do they pay people to come up with these taglines? I mean, there must be someone that's their job, is the tagline producer for technology. They're so good.
Oh, here it is. Easy online video feedback for teaching skills crazy fast. And it is exactly what they say it does. It's brilliant. Mm-hmm. So what we do is we either record the video live or upload the video into the platform. Mm-hmm. I think it equivalates out to $20 for 6 months for unlimited storage that's HIPAA, FERPA, COPA compliant.
Oh, I was going to ask you about that. So yes. Don't have to worry about it. Very nice.
Absolutely. And it boils down to $3 and some change a month mm-hmm. to host, to store, to have that sent back and forth for distance-based supervisees. The beauty of it is the bag and tag is what I call it. Mm-hmm. I used to, low tech, get a video from a supervisee of a performance-based competency. Mm-hmm. And I would watch it for a preference assessment, and I would pause the video and I would type 2 minutes and 13 seconds. In this trial, literally, it was ridiculous. So for me to review a 10-minute video, typing it in Word would take me almost 50 minutes. Again, not very efficient, but the quality of the feedback was important.
Yeah.
So I stumbled across GoReact, where the video plays, and on the same screen, I just start typing my comments. It tags it with the exact marker on the video right there. So when my supervisees get it, they want to look at a comment that I put at 5 minutes and 13 seconds. They click on the comment, it drags the video right back to it. So they have, immediate feedback for the video. Delayed. It's not feedback in situ, but it sees right there, tags that section of what I'm looking at to really highlight for them. The other thing that's really great is you're able to have supervisees or students rate themselves. Mm-hmm. I think that's important.
Oh, yes.
How do you think you're doing? So they can submit their own video for feedback, do their own feedback, and look at that. Mm-hmm. There are so many different things in terms of looking at assessment and analytics. Mm-hmm. So the GoReact platform has different tests that you can incorporate. It's got rubrics, markers. Those are the tags. I can create a marker. Mm-hmm. Say I was doing Early Start Denver model. I have one of those set up, and I have captures child attention, manage behavior. Mm-hmm. I can put a color-coded tag. Instead of typing high response effort, all of my feedback, I can tag great exemplars, catch them being good, and they can see all of the tags that I've highlighted for quality outcome performance measures. Mm-hmm. The system then keeps track of all of that awesome data for me, and I can look at analytics over time.
When you were demonstrating that at your talk, that was one of the pieces that seemed to be the biggest time saver beyond the actual, the fact of how long it takes to watch a video, go back to kind of figure out where did I want to put that? Oh yeah, I wanted to put it here. I got to write this all up. But the idea that it tracks all of that, because I know my note systems have always been like, oh, I've got it all. It's all in my notes. I wrote down like generally when these things happened. So, you know, if my supervisee got audited, I could totally find it. It's somewhere around here. But what a nightmare trying to get all that information after the fact. But having it all in one place, nicely scored, data that I can use to say, I definitely saw my supervisees engaging in this skill, and here's where I gave them feedback. And if I have to tell them, hey, you didn't do the thing I said, I have it right there. It's very concrete, nothing personal. Remember, this was the feedback. Let's watch it again. All of that just seemed amazing.
Yes. And they just added a new feature where I know some people do online supervision, and I don't know that they're always using a HIPAA compliant method to communicate across the
Our
internet.
YouTube videos might not count as HIPAA compliant.
But GoReact now lets you do that. The other awesome thing, when I'm watching somebody live through GoReact, I tag my comments. It records it. They get to watch that live session with my detailed feedback later. I can talk, and it marks it on the video as it's happening. And the newest feature that they have is being able to have live, like a Zoom, and that's all recorded where you can tag those comments. So it's really a great way, as you mentioned earlier, about the process and talking about things in constructive, collaborative approaches for analytical development of those thinking skills, of verbal repertoires. This system really lets you tag those role plays and feedback in a way that I think you don't get when you do it in person. So if we think of a live role play, those words are transitory. They're gone. When you say them, they're gone. We don't remember, like, did he have a tone when he modeled that feedback? We can go back on a video and we can watch it together, calibrate. Oh, yeah, he did have a tone. Make sure we don't want to have that when we're giving feedback to parents, even when they're disagreeing with us. So it gets that really reliability there for everybody to be on the same page, literally, and to give feedback and to calibrate that. That's a process for those performance-based competencies that I think get pushed to the side because everyone is so concerned with the knowledge. Do you understand the conception and the theoretical underpinnings of our field? Absolutely important. But the application, the show, the performance, that's a bit harder to measure, I think.
Now, have you used GoReact just for supervision, or have you used it for, say, collecting IOA if you're doing a student assessment, or, I don't know, maybe like reviewing session notes for, when you're updating a client's behavior plan?
We've used it for supervision. So the show, going through the list of performance-based competencies off that task list. So again, not teaching to the list, but we need some kind of permanent product or some process to assess competency. That should always be there, even though the board's now enforcing it. Should have been there a while ago. Looking at parents, I give feedback for parent when we do parent training and catch them being good. And I ask them to tag themselves. Again, self-efficacy. What do you think you're doing? How can I help you? So I'm moving out of that expert role into the collaborative role of, I want to be in this with you and help you to really define and develop those skills. And if we're looking at the same thing and we're both coming at it from different approaches and different angles, and we have different lenses on of what we're hoping to get out of it, that goes back into that technology process of, is it observable? Is it measurable? What are we looking to get out of the feedback that we're giving when we utilize behavioral skills training? We want to improve behavior. We want to increase, decrease, looking at that. So if we have something that's static, that's forever there that we can look at, that gives us the ability to look at that. The other thing I think would be really great is looking at having supervisees start to work on their verbal repertoires of talking, public presenting. So having them record themselves, do a presentation, giving them feedback on you're crossing your arm, what kind of body language. I know that's a little woo, a little woo for our behavior analysis. When we convey a message, how are you conveying it? It's not just the words that you say. Are they aware of how nervous they might look or how many they say and what their body language might be conveying to the audience because they're down reading their cue cards, not looking across the room? Tagging this in this type of a software can really improve public speaking, I think.
Oh, yeah. We did an article a while back about using ums. I think it was our first year of the show when there were still a lot of ums and I was getting tired of editing them. So I was like, hey, I found this article, everybody, on how to do feedback for ums. It was, I'm kind of wondering, do you think you could use the GoReact for, say, a really granular social validity in the sense of, here's a, clip of, a session that I'm running with your child, or is running with your child doing this procedure that maybe you were a little nervous of. Tag anywhere that you would say, I liked this, I didn't like this. I mean, do you think that might be a good use of the technology?
I think that's great. I just wrote a note down. I'm going to incorporate that. I think that's brilliant.
It's copyright me.
Love that,
Rob. Yeah.
Well done, Rob. No, I think that's great. I think the technology is only limited by the creativity that what you can think about how to do with it. Mm-hmm. So I hope that the podcast really generates people to look at this and some dialogue on some of the Facebook groups. Oh, I use it this way, because I would love to learn additional ways to think about doing applications with GoReact. Mm-hmm. I'm pretty creative, but everyone has their, like you said, in the back pocket, I'm out. Yeah. But looking at what you can do, the other thing that's really great about GoReact is it can integrate into a learning management system. Mm-hmm. So as we transition into how I organize everything, right now it's on the Google Drive. I've been eyeing Canvas for a while, and I like the layout of Canvas. I like how you can set it up, and I also like that GoReact integrates into it.
Oh.
So if I set up an assignment or an activity in Canvas, I would have as my activity type, it'd be like an external something, and I would select GoReact. That would upload their video, and it would all be housed within the Canvas or Blackboard or the other one. I think Moodle is coming.
Yeah.
Any of them, I think those are all coming, but Canvas and Blackboard for sure right now I know are integrated with GoReact.
Yeah, Moodle seems like it's a weird open source thing to some extent.
We used it in England. Yeah,
it's a little too. I mean, I don't want to feel like my data's trapped, but I also want something I feel like is a product, as opposed to look at this cyber utopia we've created where you can do these things. I don't know. That's a little. It's a little too much.
I agree. I like a little bit more structure. So right now, for an organization of the systems, I keep everything in the Google Drive. Mm-hmm. Their tagline, I love a good tagline, keep everything, share anything. And if you have been doing this for 22 years like me, and you're an online hoarder, you got a lot of cool stuff, right? And I have some oldies and goodies that I haven't thrown away, because you never know when someone might need them. Mm-hmm. I will put a disclaimer. It's just electronic hoarding, nothing in my house. It's just online. But it's really good to have. The beauty of working within the Google Drive system, it's free. You have access to a lot of really good things in terms of tracking. When I have a to-do list for a supervisee RBT client, I can tag a comment right on that Google Sheet, mm-hmm. that Google Doc, and it tags me. So I don't know what your email inbox looks like. Mine is ridiculous, filling up every day with something. Mm-hmm. When somebody sends me an email about a project they're working on or an assignment, I have to figure out what they're talking about, what folder. Mm-hmm. If they tag me on the actual comment and it emails me, I click on the link, it takes me to the exact document.
Yes.
So that's efficient. Right there, I'm in it. I see their question. I can answer it, done, dusted, and move it on.
Yeah. That's always good, because the people who are, especially if you have, say, supervisees or students, they know where their documents are, because they're only worried about, the 2 documents they know they're working on. Whereas you have 2 documents for 10 different people, and as good as anyone can make their file folder organization, it never feels like it's quite as good as it needs to be when you just need to find that one document.
Absolutely. So we have it all there in real time. The other thing that's really great that I have supervisees use, they do their assignments in the Drive. Mm-hmm. And the reason, not upload them, they do them there. The reason for that is not as a micromanager, but more as a let me guide you on task management and deadlines. I see when they're in there working on documents, when the last edit was. Mm-hmm. So if your preference assessment results to write up with the graph is due to me on Monday at 8 a.m. Mm-hmm. and I see Sunday at 10:59 p.m., you're starting it. That's not very good time management skills. Mm-hmm. I can give them feedback and help them program and plan a little bit more effectively, because that is something that really trickles over into our practice. If an IEP is due, if that treatment plan, behavior intervention plan, reauth is coming up, mm-hmm. we don't want to rush and hurry and do not quality work at the end of the auth. We want to think about how to pace and kind of work it through. Mm-hmm. So Google gives me the opportunity to keep an eye on that for some supervisors who might need that extra support and guidance.
Mm-hmm. Now, I remember you showed I didn't even think it was Google Drive, to be honest, because it looked very fancy. You had a really great kind of checklist for the task list for all of your supervisees that you made. Did you make that yourself in Google Drive? Because it seemed like it had a lot of drop-down menus and fancy bells and whistles, whereas when I make any sort of spreadsheet in Google, I'm just happy when it makes a graph that looks, 70% of what I could do if I really were focused in, say, Excel or like a dedicated spreadsheet program.
Yeah, that is done in the Drive. You can do it Excel or Google Sheet. And I have an amazing tutor, Melissa Drusko. I'm going to throw her name out there. She is a whiz. Anything I ask her, hey, Melissa, I think she's the director of ABC behavior training. She's got a website. She does supervision. Anything that I ask her, hey, I want a conditional format. I want a formula to make it do something. She has the answer. So we started collaborating, and I would reach out to her, and that system with the color-coded bars that look kind of like enabled, that's all done just by conditional formatting and putting these fancy formulas in. If this minus this, that's all lingo for coding, but that's beyond my skill set.
Yeah.
But she is the go-to for that. And you can see that looks like a product that you would pay for. It was created for free in Google Sheets. The reason I have it on the Google Sheet is I don't want to be messing with downloading an Excel, uploading it. What version? Did you forget to send me the latest? Nope. When you are in Google, it is real-time updated. My supervisees track their hours. I think I showed that, and that utilization of hour pie chart fills in for what they're doing. I can lock it at the end of the supervision period. It's locked. I fill out the form. Don't change those hours because it would change my form. I ain't got time for that. And it goes back. So it really gives us that opportunity to collaborate on docs, sheets, anything in real time. And there is a log that tracks every click on those documents, which makes it super efficient for me that I'm on the same page as everybody. But it's all done in that system. And again, that has evolved since you saw it in May. It's evolved even more with competency rubrics that are attached to those color-coded pillars that you saw. So it's ever evolving as I have 15 or 20 more minutes extra each week to work on it.
I'll be honest, Jamie. Have you thought about packaging some of that stuff and trying to market it to other people?
I would love to.
Because I was just sitting in that thing going, you know what? I like this talk a lot, but man, if you had like just $20 to buy my thing or $50, man, I would snatch it up because you have it. It's not that it's expensive or hard, but it is one of those time-consuming, plan-ahead pieces. And since you've been in technology and been interested in technology for so long, it's one of those skills that you've honed. But for someone who's like, all right, Google Drive, I can use that. Some of those pieces, you're going to still need your kind of tech guru, their own Melissa.
Yes, I would love if anyone would be interested in collaborating on that. It would be phenomenal. It benefits myself and my supervisees, but it would be even more beneficial for the field if everybody had a system to track competencies. So not just looking at the permanent product of what our supervisees do, that's kind of what it looks at, but also the process. Because it's an ever-evolving competency is an ever-evolving skill that we work on that really evolves over time. And thinking about maintaining competence, it's not static. It's an ever evolutionary experience that looks at our goals, our performance, our skills, our knowledge, quality. So when you get that BCBA, those letters behind your name, that's step one. You're not done. There are so many other things to finesse and to work on in your skill set. Having technology help utilize this to keep us at the top of our game or level up, that's what I like to call it, I think really makes the difference. It makes it efficient. It could make it effective. And I think it could really change, maybe resolve, revise, modify some of the practice issues that I know I see of in the field that worry me, having been in this as long as I am. So, I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
I think the supervision to become a BCBA has gotten more in depth, and some of the pieces I've really been huge and felt like I've been on top of. So the behavioral skills training, but some of the changes feel like you almost need this new level of technology to keep up with what needs to be recorded and how is it recorded. And it is very nice to know that there's a light at the end of the tunnel, but sometimes it does feel like getting there, like learning the technology, learning how to use it efficiently, figuring out what works, what doesn't work. Meanwhile, your poor supervisees are kind of your guinea pigs while you're messing
so great.
up. Like, ooh, I lost everyone's data. Sorry, everyone, rewrite those. It does seem a bit overwhelming. It was one of the main catalysts for my saying, I need to call Jamie and say, hey, how would you like to, you don't have to be on my show. Could you talk to me personally about this?
Absolutely. I'm always willing to share. And I've been very fortunate to find other like-minded individuals. And truly, I remember being kind of where it sounds like you might be at now. I felt like that light was a train coming at me, not the light of the end of the tunnel. And I've evolved past that. It was a scary time for a while. But I feel much better now about the application and I think using it. And that has been technology, going down that rabbit hole, learning these contingencies, figuring it all out, and having a system and a thought for a system. And what I would love to do is to do some pilot research on this PSI using technology system, the modules that are being built in Camtasia with ASRs, the tracking of the video show knowledge, if you will, in GoReact. What is that type of system in a 12-month or 18-month supervision program? What does that look like for outcome data for supervisees in terms of retention and sustainability of their skills after the test? I think that'd be a phenomenal long-term research project to utilize technology to really kind of look at what is something in our field that can help improve our supervision practices, our service delivery, its outcome. How do we measure it? That's, I think, up to the person who is defining what they want. Again, what is the success? That would be fascinating to look at that. And then with data to support it, let's package it and get it out there because it's tested and trued and ready to go.
Yeah. I think even some of the quality of life information you could get from what those packages, those personalized systems of instruction look like, it reminds me of some of the research they did on, say, Sesame Street. I think they still do on Sesame Street. Where do kids move their eyes? When we're teaching letter A, are they actually looking at where the A is, or are they looking at, Grover's over there and that's more entertaining? So I have no idea. And I'm not pairing these two, the sound of A and the letter of A.
Absolutely.
Even with adults, it sounds a little juvenile, but that same thing. If we have a lot of videos to, teaching videos, you could get information about behavior analysis anywhere online, but is any of it good? Is any of it going to stick? Yes. Does any of it actually do anything other than, well, I watched a bunch of videos on preference assessments. I don't actually know how to run one, or my knowledge of it is totally skewed because the video itself focused on the wrong things. And hey, I'm just making a video. I wasn't thinking about everyone using this as their only training document.
Yes. And what if you had that in Camtasia or Adobe Captivate where it has a pause with an ASR? Did that person run that trial step 3 correctly? Everyone does things differently. So you would have to be able to customize it for however you thought a preference assessment would be done. Yeah. There's some great literature out there. And thinking about in GoReact, tagging it and having video examples. So when I give feedback to supervisees using GoReact, if they're not quite picking up what I'm putting down in terms of I'm trying to convey this message, they're not getting it, I can go into the video library that I've created with an exemplar of this is what I want it to look like. Tag that with my comment and they open the video and they can see how theirs does not look like mine. Match to sample. Those video models and thinking about all of this with BST is so helpful. When I have a question on technology and I can't figure it out, you know where I go? YouTube. And I find a video and I can work it out. I can go to the Google forum and I can still not understand the text that they have there for when I'm trying to think about a conditional formatting. I'm going to my second search, which is YouTube, and I can certainly, sure as day, find a video, pause it, click. There you go. All done.
Yeah.
It makes it more accessible for me and less frustrating because I am not a technological savvy person. It's all been kind of self-taught with awesome video models and a great tutor to get me to where it is. And I still keep learning. It's just amazing what you can do.
Jamie, we talked about Kahoot and Menti for sort of the increasing responding. We talked about GoReact for all manner of utility for video, tagging, instant feedback. We talked about the Google Drive for being able to, again, that similar, quick reacting to what your supervisees, your students are working on. Also to have everything kind of organized, to a much better extent. Are there any other pieces of technology that you're especially excited about, or you're looking into right now that you think will be kind of the next big thing?
Really moving everything over to the Camtasia and to Adobe Captivate, moving into that. Those are where we're playing with right now. And I've really been watching the Khan Academy. His concept of that's teach to mastery, not test scores. It's phenomenal. And there's a 10-minute TED Talk that he gave that I think could change somebody's perspective about online learning and how valuable it is and how we need to have the foundational knowledge that might be missing. And we are still required to move on in our traditional education 1.0 versus looking at a personalized system of instruction, PSI, looking at how do we get students, supervisees, RBTs, getting them to mastery before leveling them up when they're not ready. And then we see these gaps and these foundational skills are not solid. Mm-hmm. So I'm really looking at what they do. And I found this awesome blog about demystifying the Khan Academy, what technology they use to make those awesome courses. And it's Camtasia. They have Microsoft Paint, a tablet app. It's very simplistic, as you mentioned. It's very easy to see how they create these awesome online courses, to think about how to utilize that technology for modules. Mm-hmm. So I think about module 1. Here's the content, the application, the knowledge. You don't pass it till you pass it. Moving on to module 2. So not moving supervisors forward until the data shows us they're ready to move forward. So really that application of personalized system of instruction, competency-based education, and technology. So we get the fusion of behavior analysis, learning science, and technology to really change the game in terms of supervision, staff training, parent training. That's where I see everything kind of merging together somehow into, I don't know the answer to that yet, I haven't played with it, into this new system. It's that systematized system of supervision is kind of what I call it, for lack of a catch name, because I don't have that skill. But I'm always open to looking and seeing new stuff. And it'd be great to have a Facebook group running about technology and how people utilize it. I think specifically for the field of behavior analysis, because that's where most of your listeners are probably going to be at, is in behavior analysis.
Is there a special interest group in ABAI for technology at all? I haven't looked at the list in a long time.
I don't know. That's a great question.
I know they have one for social media, or they have one for like social media. Maybe it's not social media, but that sort of outreach dissemination track. I would hope they'd be looking at something a little more high tech in that high tech field. But I don't know. I think technology is one of those pieces that weirdly it seems like behavior analysis only found. I mean, they've known about, like you were talking about teaching machines from back in Skinner's time, but sometimes I feel like it's one of those pieces that got left out by a lot of folks, and only in the past 5 to 10 years has anyone said, you know what, I bet we could do this faster with a computer or with some sort of software.
And I did take a quick peek at the ABAI website, and there is behavior analysis and technology. There is a group with a website. So I will absolutely be looking into that as soon as we're done chatting.
Like you should be in that group. I'm
going to join. That's amazing. I didn't know it existed. Thanks to you, Rob. I appreciate that.
Oh, not a problem. So we've got a lot of different pieces of kind of software and technology to be used. Mm-hmm. One of the other things, and we started talking a little bit about it at the beginning of our conversation, is for the, I don't want to call them a Luddite, but someone who has very little patience with technology. Do you have any tips for how to judge or how to determine what technology might be useful, and then maybe how they could quickly judge whether or not it was something worth exploring? Because I know for me, when I first started looking into more technology for all sorts of aspects of my life, not even just professionally, I would often forget to ask myself a question about what is it I want to happen here. And I would just find like 50 different there's 50 different messaging apps or 50 different collaborative online document apps. And I never know which one should I use. And I sort of just pick the one that was either the cheapest or the first one I found. And it wasn't always one that I was happy with. What's your technology process, or what could you boil it down to for someone who's not as savvy as you are?
Yeah, color-coded list. I would literally started a list in Google Sheets. That's where we live and breathe in the Drive. Mm-hmm. And what you said is so pivotal, trying not to lose sight of the mission, the purpose, the focus of what you want that technology to do. Because what I found is as soon as you go down that rabbit hole, you start looking around, they have shiny, distracting little features that you go veer off the track and you're like, well, that's exciting. Then you're down another rabbit hole and you forget that has nothing to do with the original search you were looking for. So I made a list, pros and cons, cost, and I had it all kind of calibrated out. And I had it conditional formatting. The most of the answers that would pop up would turn green. And then I would get my column. Oh, it's Camtasia. Every box in there is green, which means it's picking off every item that I needed it to do. Mm-hmm. So really objectively thinking about what do you want to use technology for? Mm-hmm. Or Google. Google is amazing. I would be lost without it. Googling, is there a technology available for creating online courses with interactive quizzes? Mm-hmm. And you can start to do like a literature review search. You can start to kind of Google and tease out what you find. I think about it like if I did a lit review, I'd read the article, but then I'm in the back of the article looking at other articles that are going to spider web out for me. So for me, it was very much that same process with how I started evaluating technology and started identifying the ones that work for me. That list helped keep me in my lane because it was very easy to find something shiny and new that I thought I have to have, but truly had nothing to do with what I was looking for. I don't know if you've ever had that with an app. You're like, oh, I need this. And then you say, I really didn't need that.
I mean, especially with, we were talking a little bit off the air about kind of getting some of the technology together just to do the podcast. I did not train to be an audio engineer. And then I just happened to get my BCBA. I was a BCBA. I was a special education teacher who decided I could use technology to record audio. And man, if you want to search, it's almost like if you were to say, you know what, I'm going to be an astronaut today, you wouldn't even know where to start looking. And even the baby sites would sort of be above your head in terms of, I don't know what any of these things, I don't know what a decibel is. And why does every microphone cost $500? I don't think I should pay for that.
And it's hard. You're right. It's the tip of the iceberg. Where do you start digging around and going and looking for things? If you have somebody that you can ask, that's a great resource. If you don't have a tech savvy colleague, friend, family member, you really kind of get online and start trying to figure it out, or join the behavior analysis and technology special interest group or Facebook page.
You should publish a list, right? I can't believe we haven't heard.
I can't either. As much as I love technology, that you were the first person that's told me about this or had that idea, and now we know it exists. That's my favorite thing out of this whole podcast. Is this chat. And I think just like you did, it's making the list and sticking to the list and looking at that. And I was chatting with Janet Twyman at Boston after my talk about how she evaluates apps that she would look at for learning. And there was a whole matrix that she had. It's probably in one of her published articles. And it's a lot what Bill Heward talked about at Ohio State. Are people getting it right for the right reason or the wrong reason in the instructional design? So we have technology, we have the process, and we have the product. And this is thinking about the process. Is that app that you're using, and I'm sure you've seen this in online CEU opportunities, you just keep clicking and you get to pass and get your CEU. That is not exactly the best way to ensure competency, accuracy, retention, but the technology can't do what it should do, some of those applications. You just keep clicking, you get your 80% and you're done.
Yeah.
Is that truly mastery? Because the system set you up for success, not because you knew that content. You see what I mean?
Oh, well, we had that same problem when we were starting to think about how were we going to determine whether people gained anything from the podcast. And we sort of came up with, they have to listen because they got to find these code words spread throughout. But, that doesn't mean anything. All that means is for all we know, someone downloaded it, scrubbed around till they heard a word that sounded weird, and then took a shot. Maybe these are the words I need because they don't sound like their behavior analytic. There's no way to assess. And, on the one hand, we said this is 100% of all web-based continuing education opportunities right now. So we're not really doing anything wrong. But on the other hand, wouldn't it be nice if we could do more? And then we sort of had to stop and say, we have no idea how that would be. Just producing the content takes up the time. I think about could we record some of our sessions with GoReact and then build in more, at least in-depth questions. So there was at least an assessment tool that, we were getting more than just, I heard some words in there. I trust me, I listened and, I hung on every word and now I'm a better person for that. We hope so, but there's no way to know for sure. And how much more could we do? What's feasible? And realistically, GoReact doesn't sound very expensive, but it wasn't that long ago where, you want to have something that's interactive online. That's a lot of money and a lot of bandwidth. And if you don't have the capital, we're not even a mom and pop organization. We're just, we do this at, out of the house. We are a recording studio, this is where I am right now.
Amazing.
It's just the dining room table. It's nothing fancy.
I love it. I
was told I'd be in trouble if I tried to put up that sound baffling around the room. I was told I was going to get yelled at. So we
next house.
The next
Level
house
up.
Build the studio. Yeah.
That's right. Start small. No, I think you're absolutely onto something with the podcast. Maybe thinking about GoReact again, having people tag interactive feedbacks as it's like when you have a webinar, people can chat in the chat box. You could think about the podcast maybe through GoReact where they could comment and you get the comment, which would be every single thing in there. It's timestamped. So if they just threw a bunch of answers at the end, you would know they didn't listen to the whole thing. Yeah. It's kind of built in where you could see real time people who are interacting. And maybe you had over the course of a 1 hour podcast, we want to see 3 discussions, questions, follow-up that's tagged on GoReact. And when those are spaced out every 15 minutes, like an interval, you get your CEU certificate because we know you were in it for the 15 minutes and you picked out something in there that you were an active participant. Oh, I like that. We're going to get that. I think something like that is absolutely on the right track of getting more bidirectional kind of feedback with your learners. If it's for a CEU, how do we measure and objectively define that they're getting what they need to get out of it? You have, the podcast, people like to listen to this when they're driving to work. That'd be hard to interact with it when they were doing that. So are there some opportunities where people get to just listen to the podcast to listen? And then you have different ones where you have a different aspect or a different outcome for those podcasts with more interactive learning, or maybe that moves into a webinar. I think the world is your oyster in terms of what you want to do and how you disseminate the information. And I think you guys are doing a stellar job of it.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah. So I think, you have works.
Thank you. We're always excited to do it. It does let us do fun topics like talking to you about technology, which is, again, I think it's kind of one of those areas of audience. If I were just going to your talk, I would have just left it saying, that's a lot. I don't think I can handle it. But sort of knowing that, well, you know what? If I make it about making, a topic for my podcast, it's a little easier to sort of start that conversation of I want to talk about this big thing, as opposed to, hi, I'm just a practitioner who doesn't understand technology. It's almost a different. You're sort of changing the audience in that situation. I don't know. That's not a
great. That's great feedback. No, it's great feedback to hear. If somebody got something out of it, that they felt like they could take it and do something. And that was my purpose. My goal was like, hey, if I can do this, you can do this. And this is how easy it is. Here's just a ton of ideas to overwhelm you and intrigue you. For you guys to go back and kind of riddle it out. Oh, if we just picked up GoReact and used that as a game changer in your practice, that would be amazing. And then when you felt fluent with that, maybe you pick up another system that you want to bring in and you think about a task analysis or kind of component composite skills. Again, what do you want it to do? And really kind of laying it out there of, I'm just going to start with GoReact. And when I'm proficient, I'll add something new in. Because I think if you try to do it all at once, like the system that I have, that has evolved over the past 10 years. It continues to evolve the more I'm in technology, the faster it is evolving. As technology keeps getting better and better, and I keep getting more fluent with it, I know more and more. My scope and sequence is narrowing down. I'm getting the idea of, PSI with competency-based education and technology. That is where we're going, and there will be some system that comes out of it as a platform for people to use, because I think that the stars are aligning, that is what's going to be an amazing contribution to our field, is looking at mastery. We call it rinse and repeat, recycling to master. You keep doing it till you get it. So really kind of narrowing the focus of, I could spend a whole hour talking about video feedback using GoReact, and that app, that would be a whole day training, honestly, to go over how amazing that system is and teach you how to use it. The other thing that's really great with these applications that we've talked about, the customer service and support, they're wonderful.
Oh, I think that is sort of a known quantity in the field, that if you can't answer people's questions appropriately, there's always the free alternative or the more expensive alternative, but there's always an alternative. So if you drop the ball there with your users, then they just move on. There's something else.
Yeah, absolutely. If you have access to that, or again, YouTube, go in and find a video model, thinking about what that could look like. And we talk a lot about competencies in the field and proficiency, and it's interesting. I think the numbers when I started out was less than when I was a BCBA back in 2004. Let's say that there was less than 5,000 BCBAs in the world. And now I think we're upwards of almost 30,000.
Oh yeah. It's that exponential curve that the BACB likes to show off every time the exam results come out.
Yes. And I think that there are quality programs and quality supervisors. And then I know I've encountered professionals, and I just wonder, something's not quite lining up here in terms of professionalism, ethics, application of skills. And I know we are kind of cranking people out a lot faster than we used to as our field is growing. And that's a wonderful thing for the field. But I do worry about the quality. And if we can utilize technology to enhance the quality of what we do in our application and still continue to pump those individuals out, then I think we're balancing things back out that I feel like might be out of balance right now.
I agree. And I think you're right. Technology is going to be one of the tent poles of how do we keep producing quality candidates? How do we keep training individuals in ways that are meaningful? Those first few years where, hey, great job, you passed the exam. You're the only BCBA in this job. So I hope you know how to do everything right now, because no one's going to tell you otherwise. If you say that's the way to do it, we don't know any better, because we're, not trained in behavior analysis and having chances to, could I record some of these things, or could I get these questions and get that direct feedback in a way that is quick and efficient? Your buzzwords.
There you go. Yeah, it's like you get your letters behind your name, they rip the training wheels off and shove you, and there you go. And you either pedal or you fall. And how about moving up from to a big wheel? Can we get a big wheel reeling around? And then we pull off a couple training wheels, and then you're on a bicycle. Then you're on unicycle because you're proficient and you're awesome, and you don't need that kind of support. You just reach out to your mentor every now and again. And also looking at, do people want to be a supervisor? Or you get those letters, it's just a part of the job that you didn't have a choice over. I think there is a whole skill set to supervising individuals that not everybody has nor wants to have. So I think there's a difference.
Well, there's another area where I know I've spoken to my co-hosts about is with supervision, it almost feels like, there's been so much catch up to what good supervision should be in such a short amount of time that I think we're not only dealing with, hey, everybody, we have to use some of these technologies like behavioral skills training to make sure folks are proficient in the skills, but we also need to be better with how we organize and lay out what supervision looks like. So not only you're talking about the skill of actually supervising someone, but the organization required to provide efficient and effective supervision. And for me, I love the behavior skills training. I've never never had an issue with that. I loved the 8-hour training when the focus was just on, this is actually how you teach someone to do something new. But when it came to, here's how you have to document, and here's where the paperwork's going to go, and now we're changing the paperwork, I just wanted to say, that's enough. No, I'm done supervising, until I think I saw your talk, and I said, okay, there's got to be a better way. and I think this is it. Yeah.
Yeah. And looking at, if we think about the supervisory volume, I'm just enjoying this podcast because I have all my books here I can just pull out. If we pull open the Bailey Birch book and we look at 5.02, behavior analysts take on only a volume of supervisory activity that is commensurate with their ability to be effective. How do you measure that? How many supervisees can you effectively supervise doing a rigorous kind of approach to ensure mastery and performance before, like you said, everything else adds up and you realize I have 5 at a time? Because when they run through the ring that I ring them through, it is a lot of work for me. Even with technology, I have a very high standard. I have 100% supervision pass rate. I think it's because the amount of work that I put in, that they put in, is meaningful. It's not just ticking things off. So how do we define supervisor volume if we have no data to really support that? The -5, that just happens to be because I have other things that I do and research projects I work on, not full time for me. So is there something where we look at, is there somebody out there supervising somebody who's got 20 supervisees? Not to say that they couldn't do it effectively. I just don't see under my model how I could ever fathom that to happen.
See, looking at all the technology you had, I feel like if anyone could do 20 just in terms of efficiency, I think you could do it, Jamie. I was really impressed with those. Those spreadsheets blew my mind. I felt like I was in, kindergarten spreadsheet creation, looking at those. Now, Jamie, I know you need to go pretty soon, and thank you so very much just in advance for all of your time. There was one question I had from earlier. I think we were talking about Camtasia and how that could be used to sort of set up. I'm totally blanking on the name, but the individual training modules, maybe with GoReact. Can you tell me a little bit more about kind of what you think that would look like, kind of concrete examples?
That's that PSI, that personalized system of instruction, exactly what you're talking about. Here is a Camtasia Adobe Captivate interactive module. Maybe it's 5 or 10 minutes short little burst of information.
Yeah.
Here is the rubric that we expect fidelity to. Here is the GoReact link that you're going to upload your video after you've watched the demonstration video, BFT, all in here without necessarily having to be in person. Does it replace a person? No. But I think in terms of efficiency and looking at the data outcomes, it's right there for the money.
Yeah.
So then having them upload it, self-rate, we rate it. So there is an application of performance with the knowledge that they're getting from these modules in this PSI. And I think that's what's missing from some of the online education. You take it, you take a quiz, and you're done. There's no extension to application to coming back for feedback that I'm aware of. If there is, tell me, because I'll look it up. Having access to stuff and trying to figure out ways for people to get that knowledge out of it, I think is really important. And I think that is, some people like podcasts, some people like webinars, some people like in person.
Yeah.
Everyone has a preference. And I think people start to realize what works best for them, defined as what engages them the most, that they get input back out of.
Yeah. Oh, well, Jamie, I know I've taken up more of your time than I think you'd budgeted for. So thank you so very much for chatting and for coming on the show.
You are very, very welcome.
It was a real pleasure. It's always nice to know that there's someone out there who is a model of how to learn about technology even without knowing it all already. So there's hope. Yes. There's hope for all of us to learn these. and it's also good to know that there's a resource that we can we can find in the field, and now we know there's a group for it too. And
yes, I'm signing up as soon as we're done with this podcast. I have it pulled up on my computer, and I expect to see you in the group at the meetings as well.
Oh yeah, I should be in more groups. I always tell myself I got to be in more groups, but I'm always a little like, what if I'm not going to do enough work, or they think I'm not? Yeah, it's always a
time. It's always time commitment. But I think it'd be great.
Always a problem. Yes, time is always a problem. Well,
it's been absolutely wonderful. Thank you, Rob, so much. It's been so great to share this topic. I hope it helps people not be as afraid of technology and realize how attainable it can be at your fingertips with just a couple of little resources to get you started.
Yes. And now, would you be amenable if people listening wanted to reach out with basic tech questions? Would you be all right? Is there a contact?
Yes, absolutely. It's JHUGHES hyphenated LIKA at summitautism.com.
Thanks once again to Dr. Jamie Hughes-Lika for being on our show and talking about her technology. I hope that we have more conversations and chances to speak with her again, because I was fortunate enough to see her talk, like I mentioned in the interview. And wow, just hearing about the technology is exciting, but seeing it in person is pretty not overwhelming, but it's just the right amount of amazed-whelming, I guess. That's a new word. I just made that up. Thank you all so very much for listening to the show. If you liked us, please feel free to subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you download your podcasts. You can feel free to leave us a review. You can also find us on Facebook, on Twitter, and on our website, abainsidetrack.com. And please feel free to drop us a line with topic ideas, thoughts, questions, or feedback at abainsidetrack@gmail.com. Where I'll be back with another of our regular episodes coming up very soon. Hope you enjoyed this bonus. Remember, till next time, keep responding.